The London system is the opening choice of cowards, an opening played exclusively by beginners, an opening in which white gives away his opening advantage voluntarily. Or so we've been told, because using the London system, I was able to obtain a chess.com blitz rating of 2500. You see, the problem that most people have with the London is that, okay, d4, d5, bishop f4, this is the starting position of the London. Now, the problem that some of you may have is that once you've built the London system setup, you might not know what to do next, and oftentimes you end up self-imploding. So in this video, I'm going to show you a way that you can play, an interesting way to play, once you've built the setup with the pawns on the dark squares. So we're going to look at the main line where black goes c5. This is the most principled approach by black to occupy the center with the two pawns. And you probably already know that in this position, when black goes bishop to d6, we respond by dropping the bishop back one square to g3. And the idea is that if black decides to take the bishop, we take with the h-pawn, opening up the rook. So typically black is not going to trade, he's going to castle kingside, and in this position you're maybe running out of your opening preparation. And truth be told, when you start improvising, that's probably where things are going to go wrong. But why think for yourself when you could just copy the best? Known by some as the Norwegian nightmare, the smasher of tables, the wearer of jeans. Of course, I'm referring to Magnus Carlsen, who has been known to play the London system, of course, with great success. Now, in this position, Magnus prefers bishop b5 over the move bishop to d3. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with bishop d3 at all, but bishop b5 is less well known. It carries an element of surprise, so it does have its advantages. Now, before I show you a game played by Magnus himself, let's talk about some of the things that black can respond with in different scenarios, some mistakes that black can make in this position. Now, the first mistake that black could make in this position is queen to c7. Now, it feels like black is holding everything together, guarding the knight, guarding the bishop. However, if you take a moment to think about it, there's a move that we can play here to win a pawn, which of course is d takes c5. Black cannot recapture because of the bishop looking at the queen there, and so black's probably best move is to take and go e5. But of course that is good for us, we win a pawn there. Now, a lot of my opponents in the 24 to 2500 rating range in this position, they play the move a6, and it's really posing the question, are you actually going to part ways with the bishop pair, and especially the light square bishop, which is a very strong piece in the London system? And it turns out that yes, in fact, we do take on c6, and immediately we're going to take advantage of it by exploiting the weak pawn on c6. Now again, if black plays queen to c7, there are actually two ways that we can win a pawn. So of course the first is, as before, d takes c5, and black cannot recapture the pawn. But in fact there's a slightly better way to win the pawn, which is first to take on d6 and then to go queen to a3, and we're kind of exploiting the fact that the queen on d6 is undefended. So black cannot move the pawn, cannot take the pawn either. And so black's only way to defend the c5 pawn is to bring the knight backwards to d7. And you could take a moment to think about what you would play, but the move here is knight to b3, adding a 1, 2, 3 attackers on c5. Black has only 2 defenders, and so we're going to win the pawn, and we're going to get a good position. So this is after queen to c7. Now a better move for black, instead of queen to c7, is to take on d4. And what we first do is we first trade the bishops, and then our idea is to take with a c pawn and essentially to play on the c file and take advantage of the backwards c pawn. So for example, a5, black wants to get the bishop onto a6, castle kingside, bishop a6, and then rook to c1. And yeah, so you can see that the game plan for white is really just to take advantage of the open c-file, or semi-open c-file. Maybe we double the rooks, maybe we go knight e5, and white has a decent game. So that was the move a6, and very briefly, the last move that we're going to look at before moving on to the Magnus game is the move queen to e7. Now, again, we're going to follow a very similar way of playing. So first we take on c6, and then we go queen to a4. And I want you to think about what you would play in this position if black goes bishop to d7. Now, based on what you've seen before, what would you play as white now? So the correct way to play is first to trade on d6, bringing the queen, to this square here. And just like before, we're going to exploit the fact that the queen is undefended, pinning this pawn to the queen. And well, here he doesn't even have knight d7, so we're going to win the pawn on c5, knight b3, etc. Again, black doesn't need to play bishop d7. Black could also maybe, let's see, black could take on g3. We take with the h pawn, and like before, we get something where black is going to have a weak c pawn, and we're going to castle, go rook c1, and have a good game. So that is all I wanted to say regarding the alternative moves, and now we can move on to the Magnus game. Okay guys, we're now going to take a look at how Magnus is able to handle 2700 rated grandmasters using the London. So Magnus is playing against a grandmaster from Poland, Mr. Jan Duda, who's rated 2740, and let's see the game. So d4, knight f6, and we have a London on the board, bishop g3, castles, and the iconic bishop b5. Now, in this position, black plays a move that we haven't seen so far, which is knight back to e7, a cowardly retreat. So, of course, the idea is that black is disallowing the capture and kind of making the bishop look a little bit silly. And so, to avoid any potential moves like a6 and b5, simply bishop d3 played by Magnus. Now, it might look silly that white decided to bring the bishop all the way out to b5 guns blazing, only to retreat it to d3 the next move, but the knight is kind of awkwardly placed on e7, and also, if the knight were to come back, then we've actually won a tempo by coming here first and then going to d3. So, now b6 by Duda. Black must find a way to develop his light squared bishop. But now Magnus here wasting no time whatsoever. Speed and power, e4 played. Very strong move, of course, threatening e5 with fork. And to defuse the situation, black now first trades bishops, and then he trades on e4. But this position is actually already very, very bad for black. First of all, because, of course, white is threatening to take the knight, and then take the pawn on h7 with check, which is a very big problem. But if black decides therefore to trade, then black is losing because we've got a fork between both the rook and this very important pawn on the h-file. Therefore, in this position, Duda decides to play knight g6, which blunts the diagonal of the bishop, but it also gives up the pawn on c5. So d takes c5 by Magnus, bishop b7, trading the knights, and then taking on b6 the second pawn. Now, instead of recapturing immediately, black decides to go e5. Black is looking to create counterplay with e5, but now Magnus, with the no-nonsense approach, no need for complications, decides to trade his bishop for the knight, first of all, and then simply castle And then when black recaptures on b6, then of course Magnus emerges up a pawn. And if playing against Magnus is one thing, but playing against Magnus down a pawn is probably even harder. So rook e1 played. But in fairness, now black creates some counterplay, and we're going to see that this does create some good play for black. And so in this position, white decides to give up one of his pawns in exchange to basically activate his pieces. So after rook takes a2, rook d4, and it's just a matter of technique really. We're going to see some trades. Now Magnus boldly marches his king forward to f2, showing no fear, and as black, really your best opportunity might be to look for perpetual. So that's really what black is doing these next few moves. So first he trades on f3, and he's looking to infiltrate with the queen, maybe throwing some checks. But Magnus is not going to let a draw happen. So g4 first of all, preventing queen to h2 check, and then after queen to h4, Magnus says that's the only check you're going to get, because after king to g2 there are no more checks on the board. So queen e1, and we're going to get a slight shuffling around of the queens, but of course we're not looking for a draw. Queen to d2, and if white can trade queens, then we're simply going to win the rook and pawn endgame. So first of all, black refuses the queen trade, but after e6 in this position, black can no longer refuse. And then once the queens are off the board, then really the rest of the game is a formality. It's Magnus Carlsen. I think he knows how to win a winning rook and pawn endgame. So after a few more moves, black is going to throw in the towel. And I think what we can say from this game is that London can be used at the highest echelon of chess to get actually winning positions straight out of the opening. Magnus was able to win a pawn very early on and was able to convert the endgame.